What's up, folks? Welcome to another episode of Tackle Talk. So today's video we'll be talking about OEM tackle. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard this term being thrown around when talking about generally cheaper tackle. Most of you probably already know what the term OEM means, but for those who don't, OEM stands for Original Equipment Manufacturer. Traditionally, the definition of OEM is companies who make products that are then sold, rebranded, or marketed by a different company, hence the term Original Equipment Manufacturer. However, when it comes to hobbies or tackle, the term OEM generally carries a negative connotation. When you say OEM tackle, it tends to be synonymous with cheap knockoffs, or sometimes OEM is used to refer to almost any tackle that comes out of, say, China. Today's video, however, it's not about the OEM market as a whole. It's actually about rods, which explains why I have rods in front of me. More specifically, it is about a brand that hails from China that has actually been more popular as a cheap source of decently good lures that only recently became a source of cheap rods as well. This brand is Tsurinoya or Trulinoya. Yeah, I know, one brand, two names, it's a bit confusing, but for all intents and purposes, they are the same brand. It just seems that they use Trulinoya to refer to their lures and stuff, and Tsurinoya is the brand that they put on their rods and their reels. Now, a little disclaimer before we go any further into this video. This is not a promotional video for the Tsurinoya brand. I am not sponsored by Tsurinoya. I've established that pretty clearly before. I just thought it's important to state it again. I am not sponsored by Tsurinoya, and I'm not affiliated to the brand in any way. This is also not a review video. Neither will it contain any branded versus OEM comparisons. The reason why I'm making this video is because most of you have seen me using Tsurinoya rods in my fishing videos, and I've received a lot of comments and a lot of questions surrounding these rods. And as you know, if I receive enough questions about a specific thing, my reaction to it would be make a video talking about it. Enough questions out there, I'll answer it on a video. So that's the purpose of the video today, because information on OEM brands tends to be sparse or difficult to come by, especially information in English. It's really hard to come by. A lot of these, the main website for Trulinoya, for example, is in Mandarin, right? And Google Translate doesn't really do a great job at translating all the relevant information. So the goal of this video is to hopefully provide those of you who are interested with some information regarding Tsurinoya rods and a little overview on the specs of the rods and a little bit of user opinion. Just some information from a user's perspective on how the rods perform and all that. Okay, so the rods that I have with me today, there are three. I have the Tsurinoya Dexterity, the Flex II, and the Elite II. Now, this does not by any means constitute the entire range of Tsurinoya's rods. They have tons of rods out there, and this also doesn't encompass my entire range of personally owned Tsurinoya rods. I do own 3 or 4 more different Tsurinoya rods, but I didn't want the video to be like 3 hours long, so I decided to pick these 3 rods and spotlight them just to talk about the brand. Alright, so let's go through each rod and talk about its specs, its properties, and a little bit of user perspective. The first one I'll talk about is the Dexterity. So I'll have information pop up on the side just so that you guys can keep track of whatever I'm talking about and keep things coherent. So the Dexterity is probably the lightest power class rod of all the 3 rods I have. In fact, of all Tsurinoya's rods, the Dexterity is probably one of the lightest ones you can get. In terms of power. It is also one of the lightest rods in the in the entire Tsurinoya lineup, and it clocks in at about 79 grams actual weight. It is rated for 2 to 6 pounds line weight and 0.6 to 8 grams lure weight. It has a solid tip that is extremely supple, as you can see. Let me just show you right here. Solid tip, really supple solid tip, and it is a moderate fast action rod. Well, for those, I'm sure most of you already know what the various action definitions mean. Moderate fast action means when you load the rod, it tends to load all the way somewhere just above the midsection of the rod. It comes in both spinning and bait casting versions, and it comes in two different lengths, 6'3" and 7'2". Regardless of the length, regardless of whether it's spinning or bait casting, the line and lure ratings are the same on all the models of the Dexterity, at least to my knowledge. The BC version also comes with 10 guides, and the spinning version comes with 8, regardless of length. It's the same guide count for both the 6'3" and the 7'2" versions. And all the Dexterity rods come with this skeletal reel seat, as you can see, right? It's just a very simple, very minimal reel seat with the exposed section here. And it comes with minimal EVA foam trimmings. As you can see, the EVA grips are really small. All right, so it's a very minimal setup right here. And I assume that that is what contributes to that 79 gram weight. The Dexterity costs about 75 to 80 Singapore dollars before shipping from a site like Aliexpress. And yeah, so let's just talk about a bit of user perspective and my opinions on the rod. I think that the Dexterity makes a very good general purpose finesse rod. Or it would make a pretty good trout rod for that matter, for the price at least. It is very light, 79 grams, and 10 guides on a bait casting rod at this price range. Most rods in this price range, or even rods all the way up to $150, they tend to have sometimes 7 or 8 guides. And on a bait, that's okay on a spinning rod, but on a bait casting rod, 7 or 8 guides is just, in my opinion, is just way too little. There's not enough guides. What happens is when the rod loads, you're going to have not enough guides to keep the line away from the blank, and you're going to have blank rub. So 10 guides is certainly a welcome aspect of this rod. I can confirm that this rod has no problems loading 0.6 gram lures. But as with any bait finesse, because it's a bait casting rod, bait finesse application, being able to cast something as low as 0.6 grams is not only unlikely, it is really highly dependent on the reel and not so much your rod. Okay, so the rod can load the lures, it's a matter of whether your reel can actually cast those lures. And also, yeah, it does have a solid tip, and I guess that's a nice addition, but usually when you add a solid tip to a rod, it's for two purposes. It's either to dramatically improve sensitivity or to give the rod a very specific action characteristic of fast or extra fast. In the case of the Dexterity, honestly, the addition of the solid tip it doesn't quite translate. It's not particularly sensitive as a solid tip rod should be, and it's moderate fast action, so it's not the fast or extra fast action that you would generally get when you have a solid tip rod. But the rod is pretty well constructed. I have two Dexterities, and I haven't noticed any problems. There's no errant epoxy or anything. The guides are lined up well. The spine of the rod and the guides are lined up perfectly with each other. You know, there's nothing weird, nothing QC related, no QC issues. Everything is where it's supposed to be. Everything fits, nothing rattles or shakes. But my one gripe is that maybe it's got to do with the weight of the rod. This rod just feels fragile. You know, it feels like I have to tiptoe around the rod, and I've got to be really careful about how I use it, or I might break the rod. But I've used this for quite a few months and it hasn't broken yet. So you know what? Maybe it's not that fragile after all. Okay, so that's the Tsurinoya Dexterity. The next rod I'll talk about is, just get it out here, the ProFlex. More accurately, the ProFlex II. I assume there's a ProFlex 1, but never seen it, never tried it. All right, so the ProFlex II. This rod weighs in at 98 grams. Now, the weights that I'm giving, it might not be the claimed weight. It's the actual weight of the rod that I have in my hands. I actually weighed it. So 79 grams on the Dexterity, 98 grams on the ProFlex 2. This rod is rated for 4 to 8 pounds line weight and 2 to 8 grams lure weight. Like the Dexterity, it has a solid tip, really supple, just like the Dexterity, but unlike the Dexterity, this rod is true blue extra fast action. See that? Alright, I hope the camera can capture this, okay? You see where the rod bends? Right at the tip. Let me just take the Dexterity and show you the difference, alright? See where that rod bends? It bends all the way. Apex of the bend is right here. That's almost 40% down the rod, okay? Whereas the ProFlex, it only bends in the tip. Okay, so we have a solid tip, true extra fast action, and it comes in ultralight rating all the way up to medium heavy, if I'm not wrong. For the ultralight version, it only comes in one length, 6'3", 2 pieces, it's a 2-piece rod. It comes in both spinning and bait casting versions. Both versions have the same ratings, solid tip as well. Spinning version comes with standard guides, not K guides or anything, which is a bit, you know, I would prefer if it came with K guides, but the spinning version comes with regular guides, and I assume the inserts are alkanite. And the bait casting rod, this rod has 11 guides. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I don't have the spinning rod, and I assume based on the Dexterity spinning rod, which I have, the ProFlex 2 spinning version would probably have at least 8 or 9 guides. Now the ProFlex comes with cork grips, as you can see, and it comes with 2 options. You can either get the split cork grip like this, or you can get a full cork grip, where the cork runs all the way to the end. Now, of course, if you get the full cork version, it's going to be about 5 grams heavier. So this one weighs in at 98 grams. You would, I think the claimed weight is 100 grams. You would assume that the full cork version is about 105 grams. So the ProFlex 2 costs about 90 to 95 Singapore dollars before shipping on a site like Aliexpress. Okay, so now let's talk about my user perspective on this rod. I think the ProFlex 2 is an excellent finesse rod, especially if you want to get it to work microplastic, soft plastic with a jig head, you know, light jig head. You need it for that specific purpose. You need that kind of finesse control. This makes an excellent rod. It isn't the lightest rod. You know, 98 grams is not particularly light. It isn't heavy, but it's not particularly light. But that it is well balanced to the point where that extra weight doesn't actually add any heft to the rod. The rod still feels responsive and light. Also, as I mentioned, it has 11 guides. This rod is 6'3", right? To have 11 guides on a 6'3" rod is quite phenomenal. You typically only see this kind of guide counts on rods that are above $200 to $300. And it is not tip heavy at all. You know, sometimes the downside about having many guides on a rod is that extra weight, because, I mean, you gotta be a bit realistic, right? You're not gonna get titanium torzite guides on a rod like this, okay? If I had to guess, stainless steel alkanite, right? Stainless steel alkanite, 11 guides, you would expect the rod to be tip heavy. Somehow, this one isn't. Maybe it's a bit weighted towards the back here just to balance the rod out nicely. It doesn't feel tip heavy at all. 11 guides, very impressive. Now, like the Dexterity, it has a solid tip, but unlike the Dexterity, the solid tip on the ProFlex actually serves its purpose. The rod is very sensitive. It is extra fast action. That solid tip allows you, coupled with the extra fast action, it allows you to kind of really impart those precise little twitches to those little soft plastics that you're working. Now the claimed lure weight is 2 to 8 grams, but because of the solid tip, I can safely confirm that this rod can actually load way below 2 grams. It can probably load as far down as what the Dexterity can, 0.6 grams. But once again, with bait casting, bait finesse setups, how light you can go rarely depends on the rod. It usually depends on how good your reel is and how light your reel is able to cast. So of all the Tsurinoya rods, at least the ones that I own, I feel that the ProFlex II is the most bang for the buck rod. It's well constructed. It has all the necessary trimmings, and for the price, not comparing it to branded stuff, of course, just comparing it within the Tsurinoya lineup. Judging by the price, this is the most bang for buck rod. If you're interested in looking for a rod for working Microsoft plastics and finesse stuff, right? Best bang for the buck rod. All right, lastly, we have the Tsurinoya Elite II. Now, the Elite II is Tsurinoya's, one of Tsurinoya's flagship rods. It is also one of the most expensive Tsurinoya rods you can get, coming in at about $150 Singapore dollars before shipping from a site like Aliexpress. The Elite II weighs in at 107 grams, actual weight. Like I said, I weighed it. My rod, the one that I have here, weighs in at 107 grams. It is rated for 3 to 8 pounds and rated for a lure weight of 2 to 10 grams. It's fast action, tubular, and it comes in one length, 6'5", both bait casting and spinning versions. As usual, same length, same rating. So the Elite II comes with 10 guides, and it's kind of like a micro guide setting. You can tell that the guides used on the Elite II are smaller profile than both the Dexterity and the ProFlex. So it comes with 10 guides. I would consider it a micro guide setting. And like the ProFlex, it comes with the option of having a split cork grip or a full cork grip. And also likewise, if you go for the full cork option, it's going to be about 5 grams heavier. So now let's go on to the my perspective and opinion of this rod. So as I mentioned earlier, the Elite II is one of Tsurinoya's flagship rods, not only from a model perspective, but also from a price perspective. At $150, it's way more expensive than almost any of the other rods that Tsurinoya has, with the exception of maybe the Kendo. And of course, as a flagship rod, it comes with a whole host of various guide wrapping technology. It uses micro guides and Fuji stuff and all that, but I'm having a bit of a hard time justifying that 107 gram weight. I believe the claim weight is 105 grams. Okay, I'm having a bit of a problem justifying that rod weight. 107 grams is a little bit on the heavy side. And whilst the rod is decently well balanced, I wouldn't say it's as well balanced as the ProFlex. What do I mean by that? I can feel that this rod is 107 grams when it has a little bit of heft to it. Another downside of the Elite II is that it's a $150 rod and it only has 10 guides, and it's supposed to be a finesse rod. Like I said, guide count is important, especially with bait finesse rods, because you need enough guides to keep the line away from the blank at all points of loading. Now this rod is equipped with a micro guide setting, which means the guides are not only smaller, they also sit closer to the blank. That also means there's less leeway, or there's less buffer between the line and the blank. So line rub occurs very early into the bend, right? Line wants to go straight from one guide to the next. It doesn't take much bend in this rod before the line starts rubbing or even surpassing the blank at 10 guides. I feel that 11 guides, like the ProFlex does, would have done a lot better job in keeping that line away from the blank when the rod is under load. And so 10 guides for a $150 rod, a little bit disappointing considering what they did with the ProFlex. Now once again, with in this price range, this is still a very, very, very decent rod. It's just, I expected a little bit more from a flagship rod from Tsurinoya's perspective and Tsurinoya's price point. Paying 50-60% more, I expected more from this rod. That's all. Still a decent rod. Alright folks, so that's all the rods I'll be talking about today. As usual, I'll put the necessary links in the description below. For you non-local folk, I will have the Aliexpress links to which you can buy them from. And for the guys that are local in Singapore or Malaysia, you can get Tsurinoya Tackles, Tsurinoya rods from the actual distributor in Malaysia called UTS Tackles. I'll have their Facebook page linked in the description as well. And of course, guys, as with all OEM tackle, it is important to understand that defects do appear from time to time, because the QC standards are usually a little bit lower for OEMs rather when compared to branded tackle. That is a fact that everyone needs to understand when buying OEM tackle. Know what you're getting and set your expectations accordingly. Alright, the QC standards for OEM tackle are definitely slightly lower. Alright, and defects do happen from time to time. But even saying that, defects are still pretty rare. And if you do get a defect, here's a tip for you guys, especially when you're ordering from a site like AliExpress. Alright, when you receive the product, any product from AliExpress, check the product completely and thoroughly first. And only if you feel that there's nothing wrong with it, then go into the AliExpress app and click confirm delivery. And if you do discover something wrong, immediately dispute the order. And I'm telling you, without confirming that delivery, AliExpress will step in, the seller will start panicking, and they'll do their utmost to kind of, rectify and resolve the problem in any way, shape or form. Alright folks, so that wraps up today's video on Tsurinoya rods. I hope this answers some of your many questions and provides some useful information for those of you who are interested in buying such rods. This is, once again, this is not a review video or promotional video. I am not recommending that you buy these rods. I am just providing as much information as I can if you are in the market for something like this. Right? Time and place for everything. So yeah, this video was helpful for you. Give me a thumbs up. If you like my content, go ahead, hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed. If you didn't like the video, it wasn't helpful, maybe you don't like OEM brands, I don't know, hit the thumbs down button. And yeah, catch you guys in the next video. Have a nice, guys.